Right. Well, welcome everybody on this lovely Friday, January 27th, to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. We are here with Representative Sarah Coffey, Chair of the House Transportation Committee, who has a couple of bills that have been referred to our committee that she's going to introduce. And really appreciate you being with us and being part of our tour of bill introductions.
Great. Well, thank you, Chair McCarthy, for the invitation and the opportunity to come before the committee. I'm Representative Sarah Coffey, and I'm here to talk just a really high-level overview of two bills that have been referred to your committee. So it's H59 and I think it's H57. Yes. So I'll just give you the high level and really talk about like what is the problem that we're trying to solve with both bills. So the first one I'll start with is H59, which is a bill that proposes to allow the immediate family of a deceased veteran to apply for the correction, completion, or amendment of a death certificate to accurately record that the death was caused or hastened by a service-connected injury or illness. So I worked on this bill with Representative Laura Sibilia, and the genesis of this bill was that it came to my attention through some constituents that, who are part of a veterans group in southern Vermont, and they gather in Brattleboro. And a veteran who is also a doctor, Dr. Bob Tortolani, raised this issue with me, and we met. And what had been happening is that what I learned is that there were veterans who, because of an inaccuracy in the completion of a death certificate, that the surviving spouse of a veteran was being denied benefits that were due to them. And the process of correcting that was quite laborious and super time consuming, and in many cases kind of impossible. So I worked, the attorney who drafted this legislation, you are probably familiar with Tucker Anderson. He and I also got on a phone call, and there's two parts to how we can address this problem. One is through this making it easier for families to appeal or change the death certificate. And the other is kind of a more internal fix with the Department of Health. And so we connected with an attorney with the Department of Health. And if you do take up this bill, you might want to hear from him as well. But there is a way that they can internally fix that. And I happen to know my father passed this fall, and he was a veteran, and he passed in Massachusetts. And on his death certificate, there was a really clear indication of that he was a veteran and his service and everything. And so it seemed like a simple thing to fix, but of course nothing is ever completely simple to fix. But the attorney was really willing to look into this, and he started to look into it, and it might be something that they within the Department of Health can fix. But this is the other side of the issue, to make it easier for families to address this issue. So I do think this would really have an impact on Vermont veterans and their families, and I hope the committee will consider taking it up this session. So why don't I pause there to see if there are any questions?
Questions for Representative Coffey? Pretty straightforward.
Representative Hengry.
Just thanking you for bringing this forward, and also for doing the background work with the Department of Health. So that gives us a real good place to start.
Great. And if you do need to hear from people, I'm happy to help supply witnesses and make that connection with the Department of Health. So you might want to hear from him as well.
I think it's a good overlap of our public records jurisdiction and our military affairs jurisdiction. So it may be an opportunity to take some testimony and learn a little bit more about the death certificate process too. On top of some of the relationship between what's on the death certificate and access to the benefits that you talked about. I was wondering if you knew anything, Representative Coffey, about like what are some of those benefits that are dependent on?
I think it does depend. I mean, I think it does depend on how related I think it's survivor benefits. I think it's if the death was in connection with a service accident or injury. And I think, as this committee knows, the whole issue around the burn pit and the burn pit registry. And we're learning so much about that, about what some of the impacts of that. And the folks the veterans in my community, was Agent Orange, and it was the big issue. So I think it does depend. And that would be something that would probably be very worthwhile for the committee to hear about.
No, I'd just like to thank you, Representative Coffey, for that as a veteran, on behalf of fellow veterans, that always that kind of thing is good to move forward, as you and I spoke earlier on. So I think I'm grateful for that, to take away some of those obstacles.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's our work to listen, right? To listen to our constituents and
Anything further on this intro of H59 before we move on to H57? I almost feel like doing a now for something completely different for you, Representative Coffey.
Well, it's very nice to be here on a Friday afternoon, and we all need something that maybe is not as serious as death benefits for veterans. So this is I say this with a smile on my face, because some people asked if I was just doing this for a constituent, and actually it is for a constituent, but it's actually points to a larger issue. I just know as a legislator that one of the things that I hear about a lot is about sometimes there are issues with dogs, and sometimes an issue with neighbors. It also often reveals a bigger issue that might be going on between neighbors or community. Sometimes it's so this is about a dog. This bill H57 is about dog training and transparency, and so I think you'll have the bill, but I'm going to read it. So the bill proposes to require a dog trainer to inform a client of the methods and equipment that will be used to train the client's dog, and of the risks and benefits of those methods and equipment, and to require the dog trainer to obtain the client's consent to that training. A dog trainer would specifically be required to inform the client of the dog's diagnosis, if known, the nature and purpose of the dog trainer's recommended interventions to train the dog, and the burdens, risk, and expected benefits of all training options, including the option to forego training. So honestly, we, as legislators, we learn a lot of things that are outside of our areas of expertise. And so, I got to there's a lot on this, and there's a community of professionals who work with dogs, and they take their work quite seriously. So a constituent of mine, Debbie Jacobs, has a lot of experience with this. And if I may, Chair McCarthy, just read a little bit of something that she shared with me. So really, the purpose, she writes, the purpose of this legislation is not to mandate the methodology used by individual trainers, but rather to ensure that owners are informed. And in the industry today, dog trainers can do anything in the name and under the pretense of training. Dogs are hit, kicked, choked, shocked, dragged, pinned to the ground, have metal pins dug into their necks. Trainers are under no obligation to divulge to owners how their dog will be handled, and most owners do not know to ask. During training, dogs are routinely killed, injured, or suffered emotional harm that often manifests as aggression. Few trainers are held accountable, and most will continue to work in the industry. So I think I think this is, for that reason, I think this bill has a little bit more serious than on the surface. It looks like there's a lot of levity here. So, and I know that this committee does deal with the Office of Professional Regulation. And so those might be some of the questions to consider, because I think this could probably apply to all animals, but I thought the specificity of dogs might be helpful as a focus. But I know that there are other trainers who work with horses and, for example, and where it might be applicable. So I know this is a busy committee, but if the committee does decide to take this up, I would be very happy to help. There's a community of dog training professionals that'd be happy to come in and speak to the issue. But and in many cases, it's a pretty simple bill, I think. On the surface, at least, it looks like it's fairly straightforward.
Really interesting issue to bring to light. I mean, so many of us love our dogs, and when I saw the title of the bill, I was dying to know what the story is.
Yeah.
Because the title makes you dog trainers. What is happening? But I think it's at least worth a conversation with the Office of Professional Regulation, and Director, now Deputy Secretary Hibbert, might be able to help us understand a little bit of the history of if there have been professional regulation at all on folks who deal with animals, but I don't know that there has been any. It would be interesting to at least have a quick chat with him.
It'd be good to get that perspective, I would imagine.
Any questions for Representative Coffey about H57?
Straightforward.
All right, well, I know your committee is taking testimony, so
Yes.
I really appreciate you coming down and spending a little time with us. And
Great. Well, it's lovely to be in your room. And again, thank you for your time this morning. So, all right, take care. Have a good weekend, everyone. Safe travels.
Some sunshine.
Yeah. What is something?
so before we have a pretty light agenda today because I have a couple of different meetings and I know other folks are working on bills. So I wanted to give people time for that today. I wanted to say that starting next week, we're going to be getting walkthroughs of our first couple of bigger bills. And we'll take up at least H46 and take some testimony on that. And if it seems as straightforward as I think it is, we may get that out quickly.
On the fire district.
Yeah. So preview of coming attractions there, but I think since we are going to be taking up some of these bigger bills, I would expect that we will start using our Fridays a little more robustly than we have been. So for those of you who are new to the legislature, this is that interesting time where we kind of shift from, we've been doing some table setting and doing some learning. Now we're going to really start taking up some bills and doing some more robust testimony and seeing if we actually want to move some of these bigger, more complex things forward. And in this committee, because of the different jurisdictions that we have and some of the sort of smaller things that are not big new policy, but are important to individual communities. I put H46 in that bucket potentially. I'll be weaving in some things that are a little bit smaller, but I essentially think we're going to have for the next couple of weeks, 2 tracks. We'll be spending some time on elections policy and some time on sports betting policy. And then by the middle of February, I expect that we're going to be spending some more time on things like cannabis, OPR bill, and technical corrections bill. So we'll have some of those things coming too. And in the middle of that, we'll weave in some other things. Another thing you may have seen was that the Attorney General would like us to take up recommendations from the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Commission. There's a couple of things there that seem pretty straightforward. I'm interested in hearing more and taking testimony from the law enforcement members of the commission and organizations like the network, Vermont Network for the Vermont Network Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. Sorry, it's a mouthful. Sometimes get tripped up. So those are just some of the things that I think will be on the docket. So I would be prepared for the next couple of weeks for us to have a real agenda on Friday. But I think we probably won't go too late in the day, but I do want to have some testimony after lunch. And just wanted everybody to be ready for that. This is probably our last light testimony Friday for a while. We got a lot of work ahead of us. I will be following up in my check-in with the Speaker's office today on trying to strategize around getting those National Guard weekly presentations set up. So I should have a report back on that shortly.
You say you won't grab that door. Someone's trying to come in.
Yeah, we really, really do not want to give the impression that our doors are locked.
Yeah.
I think that one might have been just like waiting from the.
Oh,
Yeah, sometimes.
From that window doors open so big.
Oh, yeah.
Sockets that bad.
sorry about that.
Fire.
Thank you, Representative.
My job.
Yeah, right.
Representative Rhodes, yeah, I want to open up the table in case we want
Sure, thank you.
to. Priorities.
And I'm looking forward to getting going on some of these bills and hearing your testimony. And I also appreciate Fridays are a good busy day too. And for those of us who are 2 hours away, especially when the weather, appreciate that we might not be thinking of working till 6 on Fridays. Just to be on the record too, you know, man, I'm trying to keep an open mind about sports betting. But I have to say, as someone who's not a big fan of gambling in general, I'm trying to keep an open mind and hear how this is a good investment for Vermont.
Yeah, I want to be, just for the purposes of being on the record while we're on that topic, in my conversations with constituents, press, other people in the building, this tension between the harm that's already there from this existing gambling and what mobile sports betting has wrought already. I really want to take robust testimony and understand if we're going down this path and we do pass a bill and we take up many of the recommendations of the study committee, if we do that, that we've really been thoughtful about reducing harm, that is a big part of the work that we have ahead of us over the coming weeks if we're going to move forward and take up those recommendations. So I appreciate you saying you have an open mind. I think the way I would say I have an open mind, but I feel like my role, our role, the legislature's role here is to make sure that if we're doing this, that it's the best thing for Vermonters and that we've really reduced harm with the way that we set up this legal betting market. Representative Hooper?
I just echoed his statement. I hate to sound like Howard Dean when the lottery was coming, but it's one thing to have it available, it's another thing to make it available, which is the difference between going over to New York and hanging out at the gas station in Brattleboro.
Representative Hickey?
No, I just noticed we have 123, which is repealing the state law.
Came in today.
I'm interested to understand what that's all about.
We will have.
Short form, it's a quick read.
We will have Chair Stevens in. I've been trying to be good about doing our introductions, and we will hear the story behind H 123. I believe that Chair Stevens has introduced that concept in the past of repealing the state lottery, and I think the conversation we're having about sports betting, you know, we may see some common themes about concerns with having legal gambling in Vermont, whether it's the lottery or mobile sports betting.
Expand a little bit. It to me, I'm from Pennsylvania, and they sort of took a moderated approach to doing this, and it has now expanded to the point where when I go back, you can't go in a gas station without a video poker game sitting right in front of you. The area around Penn State that used to be, the bucolic fields of green, now they've taken over a mall and are going to put a casino in it. It's like, it's insistence, just keeps creeping in. One becomes normalized, and that's the exposure I think we might have to give some consideration to at the beginning of that process.
So in the period of time that I've been handling and kind of running point on DLL policy, we have had casino bills come in. We've had no interest in taking those up. This particular component here, I've said off the record quite a bit, but I'll say on the record now, is very similar to pulling a current activity out of the black market, much like retail cannabis, and bringing it above board. We took a tremendous, the sports betting study committee on prevention, treatment, and also putting systems in place to help people who have issues maintain their separation from the activity. And as we start taking those moments of testimony within here, that's one of the first pieces I was hoping to bring to the table was the people from the problem gambling space. Massachusetts in particular has delayed their rollout by probably pushing 6 months right now, because they really did pull back and really start mining into a lot of this. And we, as a study committee, really tapped into what they were doing. About 35 states have gone into this space so far, so it's a good opportunity for a state like us to really see what has worked and what had more hiccups, much like we did with cannabis by hitting it later. And it's when you're dealing with any of these vices, right, whether it's tobacco, alcohol, cannabis, there is always that dark side. And I see our roles as policymakers, legislators, regulators, to mitigate that already existing dark space.
I agree with that. And I think in the formulation of the cannabis rules, we made a concerted effort to basically say that the big operators should not be given any kind of preference, and maybe even less than preference, to keep it sort of a Vermont flavor and not invite in that element of we want more, we want more. So when we talk about open mind, that's sort of one of the things that I think opens the door a little bit more. We seem to be in this type of vetting, though, really subject to the intellectual property that people have that makes it available.
I see what you mean, like point of access within like the actual mobile apps.
Yeah, it comes in over the wire,
Do
so
that.
you don't have the ability to say, one store in Montpelier. It just proliferates.
Yep.
Those are things I think will be hard to envision and employ.
No, I totally agree with you, and that's why we, these conversations, I want to allow ample time to have those conversations that we had as a study committee, because we really went deep into a lot of that stuff. So I don't want to like jump the gun and turn this into that conversation right now. I want to let those organizations and prevention experts and whatnot come in and talk to you all and have those same in-depth conversations that I was able to have as part of the study. And I'll just stop there because I could keep going.
Yeah, and I think we will be having some pretty robust conversations. I'm glad to see some of the key themes that we're going to be taking testimony on are already on our minds. We'll start with seeing the language that Representative Byron and others have been working on. That bill has been sent in for introduction, so we might actually see it introduced on
They dropped the sheet in yesterday.
Okay. So I think we just have it on our agenda for Tuesday afternoon, but
We could even, we can go over the draft.
yeah.
Too.
I think if folks are interested in seeing the draft, if you shared the draft and authorized it for posting just as a draft, it's in final, it's been edited, right? It's been through drafting.
Yep.
I think that would be okay for us to post, but maybe just wanted to make sure I'm not getting ahead of drafting ops.
And I'll just send one more email to Tucker to make sure I have the most current of the currents.
Okay, so it'll be up on the website before we start taking it, at least as a bill released for introduction on Tuesday. Okay, may even be up by Monday before as a bill released for introduction, I think.
Well, what I can say is Tucker said he would send it to me as soon as it's ready.
Okay,
Beautiful.
yeah, so if it's okay with Representative Byron, I would say let's get it up as soon as it's in the form that we're gonna see it.
Okay.
Please. Yes.
All right. I think that was all of my housekeeping. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I'm sure I can email the committee if I did. But I appreciate everybody's hard work this week. If there are questions that you have about agenda setting, I'm finding that is one of the most challenging things to think about in rules. If you have feedback, thoughts, things that you feel like we should be hearing that we haven't heard yet, if there's something that you'd like to hear more testimony on or somebody that we didn't bring in. Oh, I did want to say, Director Davis's testimony yesterday about the probing questions and looking at the bills that we do through an equity lens. Some of those things are live conversations here. And until we have sort of a formal set of questions that we can work with, one of the things that I'm cognizant of is that I'm not always going to think, we're not always going to think of which voices we need to hear on a bill. So if you have suggestions from your community on any of the topics that we take up, or if there are people we should hear from, I'm interested in having a conversation about making sure that we're hearing from everybody we need to hear from on different issues. So I won't always say yes, absolutely, but I want to say that my job here is to sort of make sure we've fairly considered different perspectives on all these bills, and want to hear from you on all of that. So thanks for helping me set good agendas and getting this work done well. And with that, unless anybody has any last thoughts, I'm going to we'll go off live. Done for today. We will not be back this afternoon since I have a series of meetings.